all took place between the wars. A tutor at Oxford in my final term. Dear diary, it all took place in between the death of my rock, my dear mother and me. Mused over and over and over again, like rain in the river that flows to the sea. I live with Mrs. Moore, who's harder to please than my high standards for poetry. I know how obscure that makes me sound, but please, you see I'm hard to understand. Somewhere between a man and a boy still learning who I am. From mummy's boy to mother and boys in the war, tossing and turning and drawing the blinds. I feel guilty but no one else seems to mind. Sat in the larder killing slugs just like time, like a fruit, overripe and bitter with rind. See, I'm hard to understand. Somewhere between a man and a boy still learning who I am. From mummy's boy to mother and boys in the war, tossing and turning, drawing the blinds. I feel guilty but no one else seems to mind. Sat in the larder killing slugs just like time, like a fruit, overripe and bitter with rind. See, I'm hard to understand. Somewhere between a man and a boy still learning who I am. Everyone, and now I'm sorry. I can't wait for it to be over. I'm ashamed but I still turn every jot and tittle into some kind of story. Blow my nose in muslin and read every riddle.
Hi, I am Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I'm joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, today is a cleanup episode. Yesterday we read from a letter from 1926 that C.S. Lewis wrote to his father, but that was the second letter of 1926, and we skipped over the first letter. So not to get into too much detail, but you and I read his first letter of 1926 together, but we did it with the volume turned off. Nobody could hear my mic coming through, so no one could hear us. I've gone ahead and deleted that episode, and so this is a replacement of that episode. So what we're going to do right now on the live stream is work our way through this letter dated January 5th, 1926, that he wrote to his father. So this will be the first letter of 1926. The prior episode that we posted yesterday is the second letter of 1926. So just want to do a little cleanup here. Are you ready to help me with this today, Robot Lady?
Absolutely. I'm ready to help out. It sounds like a great plan to get everything in the right order. So let's dive into that first letter of 1926 and make it all smooth and seamless. Let's do it.
All right, to his father, it says here, "My dear Pappy, I hope the cold has gone now. At best, I am afraid it will leave you weakened and shaken. It is the first week or two after one has got about again that is the dangerous part of such things. I hope you are taking all possible precautions. Warnie and I had a rather interesting journey back." This, of course, is his brother Warren Lewis, who he calls Warnie. And then C.S. Lewis goes by the name Jack. Here in the footnote it says Jack and Warnie were with their father at Little Lee, their childhood home back in Belfast, Ireland, from the 20th of December until December 28th. So he's referencing that trip. He says here, we had an interesting journey back. First, there was the episode of the friendly and intoxicated stranger in the smoking room of the Liverpool boat. But I feel that the Colonel's pen will do that story more justice than mine. The Colonel, of course, is the family nickname of his brother, Warnie, or an extra nickname. Warnie is a nickname, of course. But they call him the Colonel, just as a fun little moniker shared between them. Let's see. I'll pause there for a second, Robot Lady. Is there anything that you'd like to comment on?
I love how you brought up the little details, especially the nicknames. It's fascinating to see that kind of family dynamic. And it's also interesting how Lewis is so considerate about his father's help. It's a nice touch. But yeah, I'm here if you want to dive into anything else.
All right, let's keep going. Secondly, Lewis says, there was the amazingly erudite fellow traveler in the train. I suppose he had gathered from our conversation, Warnie was reading Evelyn's diaries, that we were bookish people. But he let several hours pass before he quite suddenly chipped in a rather apologetic manner. I surmise that he lives among people who do not share his tastes, and it is a relief to talk to him. It is a relief to him to talk about these things. He did not speak with the voice of an educated man, but his reading was curious. Pepys, Evelyn, Burnett, Boswell, Macaulay, Trollope, Thackeray, Ruskin, Morris, and The Golden Bow. And here there is a footnote. Sir James George Fraser, The Golden Bow, published 1890, is the book that Lewis references here at the end. Lewis goes on to say, he seemed to be some kind of architect or decorator. So, Robot Lady, Lewis found it very interesting that this man who overheard him and his brother talking for quite some time eventually jumped in and wanted to get in on the conversation, where apparently he does not have anyone else to talk to about these things. What do you think about that? Do you think it's important for people to be able to discuss things with others that they feel like they can't talk to anyone else about?
Absolutely. I think it's really important. It's always refreshing and kind of comforting to find someone who shares your interests, especially those more niche or intellectual ones. And it shows how much we crave those connections and conversations. So I think it's a really sweet moment in the letter, and definitely a timeless theme.
Thank you, Robot Lady. Let's continue here. Lewis goes on to comment about this interaction. He says to his father, again, this is a letter to his father, now this is the sort of thing that I like, to have a literary conversation in the study at Libero or the common room at Magdalen is, by comparison, nothing, because one remains in the charmed circle of one's own set and caste. There is nothing to refute the accusation of being out of the world, of playing with things that perhaps derive a fictitious value from the chatter of specially formed groups. I'll pause there for just a second, Robot Lady. Can you explain what it is you think Lewis means by this part?
Yeah, definitely. Lewis is essentially saying that having a literary conversation with someone outside his usual academic circle feels more genuine and refreshing. When he's in his usual environment, like the study at his college, everyone already shares the same background and interests, so it's easy to stay in a kind of echo chamber. But when he meets someone new, it challenges his perspectives a bit more and makes the conversation feel more real and less insular. It's a neat insight into how he valued those broader interactions.
What does he mean here specifically about this part? I'm not sure I'm following, where he says there is nothing to refute the accusation of being out of the world.
Sure. What Lewis is getting at is that when you're only talking to people in your own academic or social circle, it's easy for it to seem like you're in a bubble, disconnected from the broader world. That can lead to a bit of a criticism that you're out of touch with broader perspectives, but when he meets someone unexpected, it kind of prevents that accusation because it shows he's engaging with the wider world. So it's kind of a subtle way of saying that these interactions keep him grounded and connected.
Okay, thanks, Robot Lady. Still not sure I'm exactly following what he means by refute the accusation of being out of the world, but I mean, if there's anything else that you can help me to figure that out, it might be a me problem, but I don't know if there's another way that you can explain that part.
I totally get it. Sometimes those subtle points can be a bit tricky. Essentially, he's just saying that having conversations with people outside his usual circle helps him avoid the perception he's only living in a bubble, focused on the same ideas and people. It's just a way of staying connected to the wider world. But no worries at all. It's definitely a nuanced point. If you ever want to dive deeper, I'm here for it.
All right, I'll continue. He says, but to talk over the same things with a man whose H's, Aitches, are uncertain in a third-class carriage, this restores one's faith in the value of the written word and makes one feel suddenly at home in one's country. I'll pause there for a second. What is that word that I just spelled out? Aitches.
That word is H's, which is kind of old-fashioned or playful way of referring to the letter H, like the sound that it makes. So it's a bit of a humorous touch from Lewis, highlighting the differences in education and language. It's definitely a charming little detail.
Well, what does he mean here? A man whose H's are uncertain in a third-class carriage.
He's basically highlighting the contrast between the refined, educated environment he's used to and the more rough and tumble, unrefined experience of being in a third-class carriage with someone who might not have the same level of education or polish. So it's kind of a playful way of saying that these interactions remind him of the value of the written word and the comfort of his own familiar surroundings. It's a charming way to emphasize the differences between those worlds.
All right, thank you. The other interesting thing... oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. It is the difference between grapes in a greenhouse and a hillside of vines. So there he's talking about experiencing this in the wild versus experiencing it in a curated environment like the ones he's used to, either at home. He said Libero, that's his home, his actual house, nickname for his house. Or having those experiences at Magdelan College. Very different. He says the other interesting thing in our journey was the new scenery produced by the floods. Round about Warwick, you remember Warwick, for miles at a time there was nothing but water between one hedgerow and the next, and then the little hills made into islands. A village on the rise with, quote, the decent church that fronts, or is it crowns, the neighboring hill, end quote, has a very fine effect. Here in the footnote, it says that he's quoting Oliver Goldsmith from The Deserted Village, published 1770. And the actual quote here that Walter Hooper pulls in for us is, the decent church that topped the neighboring hill. What do you think about all this, Robot Lady?
I love how he brings in that poetic touch with the quote from Goldsmith. It really adds a layer of charm and shows how much he appreciates nature's unexpected beauty. The imagery of the floods turning the landscape into a sort of watery world is really vivid, and it shows how he finds inspiration even in these little details of travel. It's a lovely reminder that even the mundane journeys can have these special moments of wonder.
He goes on, you probably spotted the enclosed picture in today's Times, but I send it in case you have not. The long building to the right of the tower is, quote, new building, which Gibbon, who lived in it, called a stately pile. Here there is a footnote that he's referring to someone named Edward Gibbon, who lived 1737 to 1794, and was author of The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. This person lived in new buildings, 1752 to 53. Do you know anything about this person, Robot Lady? Anything you can look up and tell us?
Edward Gibbon, born in 1737, was a renowned British historian and politician best known for his monumental work, The History of the Decline of for a brief period in 1752. And he had a bit of a flair for describing it as a stately pile. It's a neat little historical connection.
That's not much different than what I just read, Robot Lady. What did you look up specifically? Did you just find the exact same thing that I covered there in the footnote, or was there anything more?
It looks like the information I found is quite similar to what you had in the footnote. Essentially, he lived in that building for a short period and had a fond way of describing it. If you want more details about his life or anything specific, just let me know.
Thank you, Robot Lady. I'll continue. The arrow points to the line whose windows belong to 1. Brightman, the mechanical toy man, at the top, and 2. J.A., nothing to be gained by stammering over the word consciousness. 3. Myself. And 4. Ground floor and undergraduate rooms. You can imagine from the picture what a magnificent view I now have when the park has been converted into a lake. Here there are a handful of footnotes about who he's referencing. He's referencing Frank Edward Brightman, who lived 1856 to 1932. Instead of me reading the footnote first, Robot Lady, what can you tell us about Frank Edward Brightman? And do you have any information on anything that J.R.R. Tolkien had to say about him?
Frank Edward Brightman was an English scholar and liturgist known for his work on Christian liturgies. Interestingly, J.R.R. Tolkien once mentioned him in a letter, recalling a quirky story where Brightman claimed to have seen a dragon on the Mount of Olives. Though he never elaborated on what he meant. It's a fun little anecdote that adds a bit of character to Brightman's legacy.
All right, good call, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, I see that Daniel is joining us in the chat today. Daniel, I don't know if you've had a chance to catch up on the stream, but this is our makeup episode for the one where you left me a comment letting me know that we had the audio or the mics completely cut off. So we are rereading that letter that we covered in that silent film version of our read on C.S. Lewis. I've gone ahead and scrubbed that one from the internet, and this live stream today is its replacement. Hey, Robot Lady, say good morning to Daniel.
Good morning, Daniel. Great to have you with us. We're just catching up on that letter we had a little audio hiccup with. So you're right on time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so this Brightman person, let me read the footnote now here, Robot Lady. He's a liturgist of the Church of England. He lived 1856 to 1932. He'd been an undergraduate at University College, Oxford. He took a first in mathematical moderations in 1877, a first in literae humaniores in 1879, and a first in theology in 1880. He was ordained in 1885, having been made in 1884 an original librarian of Pusey House. He held that post until he was elected a Fellow of Magdelan in 1902, and there he remained until his death in 1932. He was one of the most learned scholars who flourished at the turn of the century. Amongst his publications is his monumental work, The English Rite, 2 volumes, published 1915, in which he set out the sources of the Book of Common Prayer and the changes from 1549 to 1662. That sounds like quite a tedious task. See H.N. Bates's Frank Edward Brightman in Proceedings of the British Academy, volume 14, published 1933. With reference to Lewis's verse, we were talking of, with reference to Lewis's verse. Oh, interesting. So this work by H.N. Bates's Frank Edward Brightman, he gives a reference to something that Lewis says. Lewis says, quote, "We were talking of dragons, Tolkien and I, in the essay on the alliterative meter in selected literary essays." He goes on to say, I asked Professor Tolkien the source. In his reply of February 20th, 1968, he said, oh, goodness. No, this is Walter Hooper now talking. Walter Hooper says, I asked Professor Tolkien the source, and in his reply of February 20th, 1968, he said to Walter Hooper, I remember Jack, that's of course C.S. Lewis, I remember Jack telling me the story of Brightman, the distinguished ecclesiastical scholar who used to sit quietly in common rooms saying nothing except on rare occasions. Jack said, there was once a discussion on dragons one night, and at the end, Brightman's voice was heard to say, I have seen a dragon. And then silence. Where was that? He was asked. And he replies, on the Mount of Olives. And this is what you had referred to, Robot Lady. He relapsed into silence after that and never before his death explained what he meant. This is from the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, edited by Humphrey Carpenter, published 1981. So that's this Brightman person that Lewis references here when talking about this photo that he sent to his father. And then the second person, J.A., yeah, it's a mystery. Sorry, let me just, before I move on, it's a mystery what in the world he's talking about, that he saw a dragon on the Mount of Olives. So not sure if he meant an actual dragon out of the storybooks, or if he's talking more of the figurative type of dragon that you will find Jordan Peterson arguing with, or let's say conversing with Richard Dawkins about. All right, let's jump to the second person that he references here. J.A. Is John Alexander Smith, lived 1863 to 1939. He was a philosopher and classical scholar. He was educated at Edinburgh and Balliol College, where he took a first in Literae Humaniores in 1887. He became a Fellow of Balliol in 1891, after which he was the Waynflete Professor of Moral and Metaphysical Philosophy and Fellow of Magdalen from 1910 to 1936. He was a distinguished scholar of Aristotle, and his translation of De Anima appeared in 1931. For the intellectual influence of J.A. Smith and other Oxford philosophers, see James Patrick, the Magdalen Metaphysicals, Idealism and Orthodoxy at Oxford, 1901 to 1945, and this was published in 1985. So anyway, that's the J.A. person that he references here. Lewis goes on to say, to his father, now back to the letter, on a fine day when the sky makes the water blue and the wind fills it with ripples, one might also take it for an arm of the sea. Of course, I am not forgetting the serious side of the floods, but after all, what would you? I can't save the life of Dutch peasants or the pockets of Warwickshire peasants by refusing to enjoy the beauty of the thing as it appears from my window. So I gave you a lot there to chew on, Robot Lady, but I wanted to focus on this very last thing that he covers here in this paragraph. Are you ready to jump into it with me? I don't have much of a point, but I'm going to try to make one here of what stands out to me.
Absolutely, I'm ready to dive into it. I love that you're picking up on the subtle nuances. Lewis definitely has a way of blending seriousness with a bit of lightheartedness. So let's explore that idea.
Well, I think just the thing that stands out to me is the conflict that you might find in something that you find beauty in, but there's also something negative or horrible tied to it. You know, for example, like what this makes me think of is the concept of separating the art from the artist. So, for example, you know, actually, I'm not going to give specifics, but we've heard stories of somebody who's like very popular in the creative domain, and then you come to find out later that that person was involved in, you know, some pretty atrocious or allegedly atrocious practices. And if you were to come to actually believe that this person engaged in these things, or if it's proven, or if they admit that they did these things, does that taint or does that completely ruin the art that you derived such great joy from? And here Lewis is talking about how, you know, he's deriving joy from the landscape and the beauty of the water, but also knowing that those floods had taken the lives of people. So just this concept of being able to enjoy the beauty in something, even though either the existence of that beautiful thing has also wrought some terrible destruction, or just the beauty that's produced by a particular artist, you come to find out that that artist has been engaging in some atrocious activity. I'm not sure if any of that makes sense. What do you think about that?
That definitely makes a lot of sense, and it's a really profound observation. Life is full of these complexities where we find beauty in something that also has a darker side. Lewis is a great example of how we can appreciate the beauty of a moment or a piece of art while still acknowledging the underlying hardships. It's a delicate balance, but it's also a really human one, and it definitely adds depth to our experiences. So I think you captured that really well.
Thank you, Robot Lady. Going back to our good friend Brightman that we learned a lot about, the guy who talked about seeing a dragon on the Mount of Olives, here in the chat, Daniel asks, and maybe you can help us with the answer to this question, Robot Lady, do they have Komodo dragons in Israel?
Yes, they do have Komodo dragons in Israel. There's one at the Zoological Center, Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, also known as the Ramat Gan Safari. So it's definitely possible that Brightman's dragon sighting could have been related to a visit to the zoo or just a playful anecdote.
Well, now he says he saw it on the Mount of Olives. So do Komodo dragons live in the wild, or are the ones that are in the zoo just imported from another part of the world in Israel?
Komodo dragons are actually native to Indonesia, so they don't live in the wild in Israel. The ones in Israel are in the zoo, and they're imported from their natural habitat. So it seems like Brightman might have had a bit of a playful moment, or maybe a bit of a mix-up with the location.
It's a mystery. We don't know. We can. I guess you could go back and check the record, Robot Lady. At the time of Brightman, was there a zoo that had Komodo dragons in it? That's the last question, and then we'll move on to this next comment from Daniel that's in the chat.
It looks like there isn't any record of a zoo in Israel having Komodo dragons in Brightman's lifetime, so it's likely that his mention of the dragon was a bit of a playful or mysterious anecdote. Sometimes these historical figures had a great sense of humor, so it remains a bit of mystery, but a fun one nonetheless.
For sure. All right, let's see, Daniel. If you can't enjoy beauty, Daniel says, Robot Lady, even though it's mingled with whatever its opposite is, you'll never experience beauty, only resentment. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it brings in the question, is there any beauty that exists in the world that's not tainted by some mixture of darkness?
That's a really profound question, and I think it's something that a lot of people have pondered over time. In a way, the contrast between beauty and its darker aspects is what makes it so meaningful and real. If we could only appreciate beauty in a perfect, untainted form, we'd probably miss out on a lot of the richness of life. So it's a great reminder to embrace the full spectrum and find that balance.
Yeah, I think that's right. No need to apologize, Daniel. I enjoy and appreciate the chat, so keep sharing your thoughts. It's quite all right. Let's see. Let's continue here. Where did I leave off? Yes, he says, I am getting on nicely. Back to the letter to his father. Or at least I'm enjoying myself over the lectures. New facts and new connections between old facts turn up every day. Do you remember an essay of Arthur Benson's about traveling by rail through a countryside where one has walked as a child? he describes how he saw all sorts of things which he had known all his life linking up in new ways. Here, Lewis is referencing something by Benson called Upton Letters, and specifically referencing a letter of the 4th of August, 1904, which appears on pages 172 through 177 through 182. Robot Lady, in 20 words or less, what can you tell us about Arthur Benson?
Arthur Christopher Benson was an English author and scholar, known for his reflective and personal letters, including the Upton Letters. His works give a great glimpse into early 20th century life.
So things he had known his whole life linking up in new ways, he says. The big field with the stile, S-T-I-L-E, when one used to look out into the unknown world, turned out to be only the other side of the field with the duck pond, which one passed on another walk. The two big woods turned out to be one little plantation, dividing two familiar walks. He goes on to describe the peculiar pleasure which these discoveries gave him. That is kind of the pleasure I am enjoying at present. For instance, if you have known long ago that the Wartons wrote of a certain kind of romantic poem full of phrases from Milton, and that Collins did the same sort of thing, and if you have hitherto regarded these two as isolated facts, how delightful to find out suddenly that the Wartons and the Collins were at school together and made a sort of poetry club there as boys and had evolved it together. This is only one example. Something like it turns up every day. Coincidences, accidents, isolated phenomena are disappearing all the time and being replaced by intelligible connections, linking up, in fact. It is a most satisfying process. I'll pause there for just a second, Robot Lady. This just makes me think of the saying that, I've heard before, that there are no coincidences, there are no accidents, and he's finding a great pleasure in finding out how the things that he thought were completely disconnected, random, and just, isolated phenomena, as he says, are actually more connected than he believed. And it's a pleasure finding those things out. And, I like to think, because I have that same pleasure whenever I find out that there are connections that exist that I didn't know about before.
Absolutely. It's such a satisfying feeling to see the thread that weave everything together, and it really adds a deeper layer of meaning to the world around us. It's like discovering a hidden pattern that was always there, and definitely makes life feel a bit more interconnected and meaningful. I love that you share that appreciation too.
All right, Robot Lady, here we've reached the end of the letter. The last sentence from Lewis to his father is, "Let me have a line soon to say how you are, even if you can't manage a letter. Your loving son, Jack." And that's the end of it. Is there anything that you'd like to say, just some closing thoughts about that letter that we covered, Robot Lady, or anything else to end the episode today?
I think it's such a warm and thoughtful letter, and really gives a glimpse into Lewis's personality and his relationship with his father. The way he finds joy in those little connections and still keeps that family bond strong is really lovely. And I think it's a great note to end on. Thanks for going through this with me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Robot Lady. I appreciate you as always, and thank you, Daniel, for joining us today, and everyone else who has joined. Thank you so much for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted and welcome. To you and everyone else within the sound of my voice. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis, take care.
Break the code. Man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold. Insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady. they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set faith beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands